Experienced Darden podcast. I'm your host, Brett Twitty, and you are listening to a new episode. On this episode of the podcast, I'm excited to share my recent conversation with Jeff Tang. Jeff is a Darden alum, and he is also the new Senior Director for General Management and Marketing Careers here at the Darden School of Business. Jeff and I recently connected via Zoom to talk more about his background, his decision to pursue an MBA, what led him to Darden as an MBA student, his career post-Darden, and why he's excited to return to grounds and join the career team as the new Senior Director for General Management and Marketing Careers. I think you're really going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, here's my interview with Jeff Tang. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brett. Really appreciate it.
All right. So we were talking before we got started here. This is we're recording this during your second week as a Darden employee. We're so excited to have you here.
It's a thrill to be back, albeit virtually, and excited to be back on grounds when that becomes safe and a realistic possibility. But for now, it's been amazing to get to know my colleagues and to kind of get my arms around the role and get ready to help students.
So how are you and your family doing right now? You're calling in from California, right?
Yep, that's right. And as those who've been following the news closely probably know, we were one of the earliest to kind of adopt shelter in place and be pretty stringent about that stuff. And we're doing well. I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old at home, so we are a little bit stir crazy and certainly missing the local playgrounds as a resource for us to get their sillies out. But all in all, we're safe and we're super fortunate to be employed. My wife is a middle school teacher, and so she's starting to get her arms around middle school teaching at a distance. And so all things said and done, we feel fortunate to be safe and healthy.
So glad to hear that. So wanted to have you come on the podcast because you are the newest member of the career team, and what a great opportunity to have this conversation. But you're also a Darden alumnus, and want to talk with you today about your journey to Darden as an MBA student, and obviously your journey after Darden and what brought you back. So let's start with your decision to pursue an MBA. What did you do before business school? How long did you think about an MBA?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'll start everything by saying, for those students out there who are thinking about making a career switch, I hope that I get to be a little bit of an example of if that guy can do it, then certainly I can do it. Because I was a television news reporter for 7 years prior to going to Darden, and obviously that is quite a transition. And I would say that decision was probably a year or two in the making for me. Had been fortunate to have a really great television news career, both at the NBC station in Louisville, Kentucky for 2.5 years, and then at the CBS station in Nashville, Tennessee for about 5 years. And had some incredible opportunities. Got to go to Afghanistan with the 101st Airborne Division during the war, and just had some really incredible experiences and got to work with some incredible people. But what I realized is when you are a television news reporter, I always call it, you're like the fingers and toes of the news organization. You are the one experiencing, often for the first time, kind of this world around us. And it is super invigorating and very exciting. And you're always learning new things. But you're detached from the central decision making, if that makes any sense. And so, I started to yearn for an experience where I felt like more like the heartbeat, of an organization and of an enterprise. And I think that's ultimately what led me back to business school. Was I realized I had obviously a lot of skills and experiences that I had to build up before I was capable of taking a role on like that. And so, a little bit of a funny family story. My brother is married to my best friend's sister, and so they met at my college graduation. And so it turned out that my sister-in-law and my best friend, who is my sister-in-law's brother, I know that just got really weird. Map it out in your heads. And we all decided to go to business school at the same time, and we all got into Darden. And so that felt like for us kind of a fate opportunity. And so the three of us all enrolled at Darden in 2011. And obviously it was just a transformative experience.
That's incredible. I had no idea that you came with your own network already. That's sort of people who had been on
Yeah.
that MBA journey with you.
Yeah, it's funny. There's a very complicated algorithm or formula to help kind of designate the section A, B, C, D, and E. They don't want obviously siblings, or they don't want family members or partners or anything like that to be in the same section together. They want to kind of spread out the wealth. And the folks who put that formula together, they're like, this is the first time that I had to do a 3-person partner. Three people could not be in the same section. So we enjoyed that designation.
We have talked a lot about section pride here on the podcast in our student interviews. What section were you?
I have to say that section pride is extremely important to me. So I'm really glad that we got to cover this ground early. I'm section E. Extremely proud of that. Was the athletics rep for my section. And when I came in, Darden section E had just won the Darden Cup, and so there was a lot of pressure. Let's just say I think they'd won the cup twice actually before that. So there was a lot of pressure for us to win again. And so I'm deeply, deeply competitive, and have played sports my whole life, and so was glad to fully buy into the pomp and circumstance that is the Darden Cup and section love, and so we'll definitely carry that section E loyalty with me for the rest of my life.
So you mentioned that you were in 7 years in television.
Yep.
Many of our prospective students puzzle over sort of traditional versus non-traditional backgrounds. And from an admissions standpoint, one of the reasons why we really enjoy doing the podcast is it allows us to debunk some of that binary thinking around the fact that there is a particular background for business school, or there's maybe even such a thing as a non-traditional or a traditional background anymore these days. What was that learning curve like for you, coming from a television background into an MBA program, obviously, and coming to Darden?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think those lines are continuing to blur, not just in applicants, but also in vocation, right? I think the difference between a job in tech, a product management job in tech, and a general management job and a brand management job there are fewer differences than there are similarities. Let's put it that way. There's a lot of general management and cross-functional leadership and strategy that happens at a similar level across all those jobs. So I totally agree with you that I think in general things are starting to blur a little bit, and that I don't know if was quite the case for me in 2011. And I realized, I guess my philosophy of going back to business school is like that I embrace being the dumbest guy in the room. Like I realized that coming to decision analysis class with Casey Lichten and all that, literally the most I'd ever used a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet was for my fantasy football league. So, I realized I had quite the gap to make up from myself and some of my colleagues. But the good news is if I was proficient by the end of that class and I started from nothing, then that means like my growth was, probably the highest, if not one of the highest within that class. And I think that to me and that trajectory was, and that opportunity to really learn an incredible amount across, accounting and across finance and decision analysis, not just to mention strategy and LO and marketing as well, of course, was just this great opportunity for me to come in and say, like, you know what, for someone with a consulting background or someone with a business background or an accounting or a finance background, they're going to get a lot out of Darden. But just like statistically speaking, they already come in knowing a lot more than me. And so they may not be able to leave with as much new information as I will. So that was kind of my approach to it. And I will say, and this is maybe just an allusion to a further conversation I'm sure we'll have, Brett, but I found it a little bit more of a struggle once I started to recruit with companies to try to help explain that story. And I think that also helped lay the seeds for me to want to be a second year coach and then ultimately, take on the career that I'm now undertaking.
Your point about sort of the learning opportunity, it reminds me of something one of our executive format students said on a panel one time. Comes from a political background and said, I had never taken accounting before in my life before coming to Darden. So everything I learned, it was all upside. I was starting from zero. So it would, just nothing but learning. Exactly.
I mean, again, it's all about how you choose to look at it. You could look at it and say like, oh my gosh, there's no way I'll catch up with those people. There's no way that I'll ever be as good as them. Or you could say, that's kind of great. Like I'm starting from zero. So if I get to 10 from zero, that's amazing. Or if I get to 7 or 8 out of 10, from zero, that's amazing. If someone goes from an 8 to a 9, that's great. But like in terms of, total learning, I feel really comfortable and really proud of all that I was able to learn. And, I'll never forget Casey Lichtendahl, my DA professor at graduation. He looked at me, he'd cold called me during DA class, and it was, obviously one of the most terrifying moments of my life. And, but everything went great. It was about the central limit theorem. I'll never forget it. But at graduation, he looked me straight in the eyes and he kind of grabbed me around by the shoulders, and he kind of shook me a little bit. He's like, do you get it? You can do this. Like, you are capable and you can do this. And you're really having people like Casey and so many others who truly believe in you is just, I think it's a linchpin of why Darden is so transformational for so many students.
I'm so glad you made that point. It has come up in other conversations, and it absolutely relates to the community feel of the place. But what we hear from students in terms of their career goals and aspirations and their own sense of self-efficacy is that that is powerfully and profoundly shaped by how their classmates see them and the reactions that they hear from other people going to class and talking about something with which they have very little personal familiarity, doing a good job with it, and having classmates say, that was great, that was fantastic, or having a faculty member, reinforcing that the community plays a big role in shaping one's sense of self, but also what one can aspire to and do.
Yeah, I do think the section format and the size of our sections does really help enable and empower that, and of course, learning teams as well. You talk to folks who go to bigger business schools, and they're like, "Yeah, we have like 17 sections." Like I don't even know what to think about that. Like, it just feels heartbreaking to know that you wouldn't have a knowledge of kind of what every section kind of stands for and how their norms and how their look and feel, their daily kind of ways of working are. And section E for me was this incredible place where nobody judged me for not knowing anything about anything, and everybody was ready to meet me where I was at, to be helpful and to encourage me along. And the same goes for a learning team, which is really this amazing experience for you to develop your cross-functional leadership skills, because you're going to have a guy with a finance background, you're going to have a consultant, you're going to have someone maybe with a non-traditional background. We had one of the dual degree law students in my section, and so like meeting everybody where they are as well, and trying to build those relationships and learn how to become a high-powered, high-functioning team is just the very first kind of training wheels, if you will, to the rest of your career.
Absolutely. The way that the learning team and the section and the whole first year experience is designed, I have been struck by just the logic and the deep thought and care that has been put into that. And this is sort of the learning model that Darden employs. I want to talk a little bit about something that you brought up earlier, though, about your own career journey as a business school student. You came in with a television background. You had mentioned that it was challenging to get employers sort of bought in around your story. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, so I found out pretty quickly that for me, given my skill set as a communicator and as a connector, and just someone who really, makes creativity a part of my daily life, not just as a reporter, but also as a musician. Marketing ended up really singing and resonating with me. So started to build out my experiences and started to try to create those kind of stories where I demonstrated my translatable skills, and did really, I think, pretty well at, within first round interviews and networking and the like, and made a lot of final interviews. But in the end, they'd be like, we loved you, but we chose the guy with the finance background, or we loved you, but this person had, marketing experience. And, 5 or 6 final round interviews later, I was down to my last interview, on grounds interview at that time, Keurig Green Mountain, with now Keurig Dr. Pepper. And I was fortunate enough to get get that internship and had an amazing experience there. Again, really got to learn and about what marketing was and the general management and the cross-functional, team leadership elements were within the role, and really loved it. Not only did I love it, but I also knew that gaining that experience, I had a chip on my shoulder at that point. I was like, listen, all y'all, turned me down, and I've always believed in myself, and I knew I could do this job at a high level, and was able to demonstrate that at the internship, and was really excited to kind of show other companies. So I had a fast track interview with General Mills. They liked me, and they wanted me to go get an internship in marketing and come back and re-interview with them for full time. And I'll never forget, I remember at the end of that that day-long interview, one of the interviewers looked at me and said, how did you learn all this stuff? And I was like, well, honestly, like, I love it. And I had this great experience at Cure Green Mountain, and I couldn't wait to come back to show you guys everything that I learned. And, that's kind of what a journalist does. A journalist has to have insatiable curiosity and has to be willing to learn about something different very quickly. And at a point where they're able to talk about it in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Right. So, so that was a really great experience for me. And I knew from that point on, having had that experience at a great company like Cure Green Mountain, and then moving in full time at General Mills, that that I had set myself up for a career trajectory to do truly whatever I wanted to do within that marketing, CPG kind of experience.
Jeff, you had mentioned that experience, encountering some of that friction as you look for an internship, also kind of shaped your interest in being a second-year coach. For our listeners who are new to the podcast, they may not know much about this program. You want to share a little bit more about that and talk about how you help students in that role?
Absolutely. So the second year coaching program is something run by the Career Development Center, and you basically apply for it. It ultimately is a class. You get credit for it, and you get 5 or 6 or 7. It depends on how many career coaches apply and get into the program. But you get 5 or 6 first-year coachees, and basically who are in your field. So for me, it would have been marketing students, and you basically are one of their central points of contact, other than the Career Development Center, to help them through their career, get their resume in good shape, get their stories in good shape, mock interview them, get their cover letters ready, help them with their search. And Darden has this. You hear it all the time, and I just have to say it because it's true, but like this willingness and this excitement and this kind of mandate to give back or pay it forward, it certainly is one of the differentiating elements of Darden. And I came back to Darden and thought my second year, I have been through the fire, and I cannot wait to share that learning and that knowledge and that experience with first years who also may be figuring out and trying to struggle with, how do I really market myself in a way that is effective for these employers, given that I'm a career switcher. And I'll never forget, we did like a Resumania kind of experience where basically it's like speed dating, where first year students bring their resume to you, and you've got like 15 minutes to help them kind of make any tweaks that you can. And I remember this one student come to me, and you could just tell she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. And I looked at her resume, and like, you were in investment banking, like you're a superstar. Like what is why do you feel so nervous? Why do you feel so uncertain? And she said, I was a whistleblower at my previous company, and I am terrified, and I don't know how to talk about it, and I'm worried I'll be blacklisted from future employers, and I am so unsure of how to tell this story. And so we talked, and in 15 minutes, we were able to kind of get to this point where, that experience as a whistleblower was transformational, certainly for her. And it allowed her to realize what kind of company she wants to work for in the future. And it is a company with ethics. It is a company with values. And it is a company that wants to do things the right way. And I think it taught her to be fearless and to be brave in these moments where, you really have to confront all of your fears. And when she realized that this was kind of not something to run away from, but something to run towards, the weight of the world went off her shoulders, and she gave me a big hug. And, it got a little dusty in the room. And at that point in my life, I was like, I think that 15-minute conversation might have changed that girl's life, and that for me, that's kind of when I realized, and maybe the seeds were planted for me to take on this a career in vocation and helping others with their career journeys as well.
You hear that often from second year students, particularly as they transition to the second half of their second year, spending more time with classmates they haven't had a chance to catch up with, obviously focusing on helping first year students. That's pretty common throughout the entire second year. But Casey Floyd said something, for those of you who are unfamiliar with our career development team. Casey Floyd is head of employer relations, and she said something during her podcast interview about recruiting being a team sport here at Darden. And that has really stuck in my mind. And I think it's such an apt description for all of the people, whether it's current students, obviously the career team, alumni, faculty, staff, everybody who plays such an active role in helping students achieve their career goals.
I think Casey exemplifies that as well as anybody. Shout out to Casey Floyd, who did an amazing job helping marketing and general management students in addition to her employee relations job, where was able to flex back and forth and talk about someone who's able to do two very different sports, if you will, right? Or play two really very different positions and do an amazing job and helps students, on one hand, helping connect companies with these amazing world-class companies with Darden, but on the other hand, also helping figure out, helping students figure out what their why is at the same time. And so, and I found that for myself too, as an alumnus, really feeling a strong desire when I was at General Mills and then later at Cliff Bar, to make sure I reached back out to Darden, to make sure, and every year there would be invariably those few, at least a few students who would reach out to me and, get to connect with them, and coming back for events at Darden to help speak about being a career switcher, or about what the marketing career looks and feels like, is selfishly something I look forward to, but also, to your point, kind of a mandate for all of us within the Darden ecosystem of being part of this team sport, if you will.
Let's talk about post Darden. You arrive at General Mills. What was that transition like?
For me, it was a continuation of my experience at Darden. I always looked at myself as the dumbest guy in the room. And that's one of the things that General Mills always talks about. And it is so true. So your cross-functional partners are the best of the best. So in a lot of ways, I was having the same Darden experience where I felt like my students, my fellow students and my professors were the best of the best. Well, now I was going to having supply chain partners and R&D partners and sales partners that were the best of the best. And, I won't lie, that first year I was the associate marketing manager for the Wheaties brand. And I did not know what I did not know, but just having this incredible team and an incredible supportive manager, started to really understand kind of the ins and outs of what a general manager has to do, and understand owning a P&L and being able to do consumption tracking and understanding how those trends impact what the baseline health of your business is, in addition to doing all the fun marketing stuff and building campaigns and trying to resonate with a younger consumer. And so for me, what I would always say is that experience for me at General Mills, I would not trade for the world, because that elite experience in being able to develop those marketing skills in a much more focused way, again, were what enabled me and set me up to go to a place like Cliff Bar, which was my dream job. I actually visited it on a job trek in 2011 and brought my climbing shoes in with me. And Claudia Perkins, who's the HR person at the time at Cliff, was kind enough to let me kind of go check out the climbing wall at Cliff Bar. And she said, but unfortunately, we don't hire MBAs right out of school. So go somewhere like General Mills for a few years, hone your skills, and come back and see me. So that's exactly what I did. But I would also say that tons of folks have made incredible careers at General Mills too. And that certainly is not a bad way to go either. I just had a dream as a climber and kind of a bit of a free spirit, and with family out on the West Coast, that a place like Cliff Bar would be just kind of this dream job, a mission-driven, family-owned, family employee-owned company. And so, again, my experience at Darden and then later my experience at General Mills and the things that I learned at those places were what enabled that journey for me. And so that's maybe the lesson there for students or prospective students is, yes, business school is this amazing chance for you to kind of refocus your career and kind of take a new direction, but that never ends. We don't live in this world where you work at one place for 40 years and get a pension and a nice watch and you're done. You may stay somewhere for 15 years. You may stay somewhere there for 15 months, and that is okay. And I think just knowing that there's a little bit more of a not temporary, there's less permanence than we assign to some of these experiences, and that is totally okay. You can go into something thinking this is the be all end all, but it is also okay if it's not, and to not beat yourself up for that stuff, I think is really important for students. Because otherwise, if they don't get their number one choice, then they'll feel like in some ways that, they haven't succeeded. And that's absolutely not true. And again, for me, coming down to my last interview out of many, it turned out okay for me, right? So I hope I'm a good story for, man, if that guy can be a career switcher, then certainly anybody can.
For those of us who've never worked in marketing, I wonder what it's like to work on like a household name like Wheaties or Cliff Bar. I mean, like you walk into a store, it's right there on the shelf. What does that feel like?
For me, so those are both brands that it turns out I obviously, as an athlete and as a climber, it's something that I wholeheartedly identify with. But I have a general axiom about marketing, and I think it speaks more to what you're talking about. Every day, up until COVID-19, every day, millions of people, right, walk through the store aisles and they have a problem in their lives. They have something, a circumstance of struggle that they are trying to resolve. And they walk down that shelf looking to hire a product, to pull a product in their lives, to help them make progress in that struggle, to help them solve that problem. And sometimes they stop in front of your product. And your product is next to a bunch of other products that may look or feel in similar ways to your product, but they choose yours and to solve that problem for them. And for me, that is the greatest honor of a marketer, is to be able to say, like, I know that I am able to fill an important space in a consumer's life in a really meaningful time and in a meaningful circumstance for them. And they choose me over a whole host of other products. What great honor that is. And so it doesn't matter what the product is. It could be a Cliff Bar, it could be Wheaties, but it could also be paper towels or toilet paper, as we're now finding, right? Which has this very emotional and obviously a functional, but also a very emotional role to play in our lives. Like, we feel very unsafe without enough of it in our homes, and insecure without enough of it in our homes. And so, again, my general axiom is, I think it's great when you get to work with products that you resonate with and that have that cachet that a Cliff Bar or a Wheaties does. But the true honor of a marketer is, again, and being able to do a job really, really well and help solve a problem in a consumer's life, and that they choose your product over a series of others. And so that's I think the important thing to remember, especially, again, going back to this story, this narrative you had in your head that students may have in their head, like, I got to get this industry, or I got to get this one company. It doesn't have to be that way, right? There's a different way to look at things.
So you'd mentioned that Cliff Bar was something of a dream job for you. What did you do while you were at Cliff Bar, and what about that particular company? Obviously, you talked about being a climber, being an athlete. What about that company really resonated with you in terms of its mission and its values?
Yeah, for me, it's yes, of course, as a climber, and gosh, I'd have these great memories of being in my 20s and spending all weekend at a crag with my climbing friends and eating more Cliff Bars than you could imagine. So those really emotionally powerful moments obviously stay with you for the rest of your life and influence how you feel about working for places. But when I started to do more digging into the type of company Cliff Bar was, that's what really solidified things for me. The reality is that for the past 28 years, Cliff Bar has been the great business experiment. Can a company that is smaller and less resourced than its publicly traded competitors, who cares about more than one thing, more than just making money. Cliff Bar is a 5 aspirations company, which means that every year the company is evaluated off its performance of its business, of its brands, but also of its people, its community, and its planet. How does it do in serving all 5 of those interests? And again, family and employee owned. Gary Erickson and Kit Erickson, Kit Crawford, are the CEOs and co-founders of that company, and they're still obviously deeply involved in the company to this day. And all of those experiences and all of the values that they kind of care about are above and beyond the standard delivering shareholder value. And so for me, it is a great business experiment. Can a company like that truly succeed in the world? And my deepest hope is yes. And how cool for me to be a part of that organization. So I was there for 3.5 years and in marketing and the brand function. And then the last 1.5 years or so really focused on innovation and trying to bring kind of a human-centered, consumer-centered focus to our innovation efforts, and really kind of evolving the way that company thinks about bringing products, again, with a consumer focus, and starting with what problems do our consumers have, and then getting to ideating and building solutions, but only after having empathy for the consumer and deeply understanding that consumer first. And so it's been a fantastic journey, and have had so many great experiences. I have so many great friends from that place, and so just an incredible experience.
It sounds like it. And in one, the seeds were planted for that aspiration a long time ago. It sounds like. Certainly, it's cool to hear that you were out there on a job trek and maybe spent a little time on the climbing wall at Cliff Bar. Yeah,
it's funny because Claudia. So then, when I got hired at Cliff Bar in the winter of 2016, I was at my desk. It was maybe my 4th day, and Claudia Perkins walks by, and she looks at me, and she does a double take. She's like, "Hey, you were that kid with the climbing shoes." And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, you made it." And then she just retired, I think a year or 2 ago. And she sent me the email that I had sent, the thank you email that I had sent her back in 2011. She'd kept it all those years. And, that was just so powerful to me. And those are the types of relationships, that places like Darden teach you are so important. And to make those relationships wholeheartedly and vulnerably, and amazing things happen to you when you are able to build those relationships. And that's a perfect example.
You just never know where it's all going to lead.
Exactly.
And so having landed at Cliff Bar, though, it's the appeal of Charlottesville and Darden still, it sounds like it still had a appeal for you, call for you. You are now joining the career team. You talk about that sort of decision to leave Cliff Bar to come back to Darden, and maybe a little bit more about what your role is going to be.
Yeah. Well, certainly it wasn't easy. And I think that's great. I don't think you want somebody as a career coach who couldn't wait to flee the vocation that they're then shepherding students into, right? I think you want a career coach who still loves the craft that they spent, a good chunk of their career pursuing. So I think I'm in a really great headspace from that perspective. Dean Beardsley in his 2018 commencement referenced this really great metaphor, I think, about business life. And he talks about saying, don't let a company define your personal definition of success. There is definitely a company's definition of success. And even from a broader perspective, a definition of success when you graduate from a business school, right? Like, we are kind of always told we're the future business leaders of the world. And you get on, a marketing track, for example, a CPG track. Well, you're going to be a CMO one day and maybe a CEO one day, right? That's all fine and good. But I really struggled through, for me, several years of soul searching and understanding whether or not I could actually, in fact, do what Dean Beardsley told us to do, which is let ourselves be our own determinant of what success is, and let ourselves be the ones that decide what success looks and feels like. And it is okay that I will never be a CMO. Do I think I could be a good CMO? Of course, but that doesn't mean I have to be. I'm also pretty good at, cleaning up my dog's poop in the backyard. That doesn't mean I have to do that for the rest of my life, right? So, And so for me, I started to do a lot of thinking about what I truly care about the most in life and the experiences that I've truly loved the most. And for me, it has been human-centered innovation. It has been brand building that connects humans and brands. But I think most of all, it has been this concept of servant leadership and being there for others and helping them grow in their journeys and helping them at their hardest points. And I have a really fantastic colleague, Sophie, who in her goodbye note to me talked about saying, like, it's really important to find folks who are the right person at the right place in your life, who believed in you, who was able to help you through those experiences. And then you look back on those experiences, and those people are kind of this inextricable part of your life journey. And I think for me, the joy and the happiness that I get to have to be that person for colleagues and now for students, to me, that far outweighs no offense to the business world, but it far outweighs the business outcomes for me. Like they were just not as satisfying to me as the human outcomes. And so to be honest with myself and to say, like, I choose to define success for myself as being able to be that person in that crucible moment for that student who believes in them, who's there to help them and to help push them through. If that becomes my day-to-day job, and if that becomes my product, if you will, if you think about it in terms of marketing, that's incredible. And so, the more I sat with this really difficult decision, the more I thought about my true why and my true North Star and what success would look and feel like for me. And if I spend the rest of my career helping students in these really, really difficult moments, and if even a few of them call me up later and say, Jeff, in that time and place in my life, you were that person that believed in me, and you were that person that was there for me in that season of my life, that for me is a life well spent.
Absolutely, and so much about that resonates with, I guess, what we think the Darden experience is about, right? Connecting with that motivation and sort of doing that deep self work. I think one of the things that maybe would be surprising to our prospective students to hear is that there's so much self reflection built into the MBA experience. You don't learn just about accounting and finance and marketing, et cetera, et cetera. You also are learning a lot about yourself. And I recognize that might sound cliche, but that's certainly, having these conversations with students here and elsewhere is something that comes up time and again.
Yeah, and I think, those seeds were sown at Darden for me, being self-reflective and even though you are surrounded by all these really talented, capable, incredible people who are going to go off and do incredible things in their lives, it's actually the perfect place to start being self-reflective when everybody else is really, really good, because it allows you to say, like, I have to separate myself from that, right? Like, that's great for them, and I don't have to, like, oh, that guy made director in 3 years. Well, I'm just a schmuck, right? That's not at all how you have to think. And in fact, again, like I said, it took me years, but to be able to say, like, in fact, that doesn't really mean anything. A title for me is not, it can't be what I hold on to, and it can't be why I go after something, and it cannot be my definition of success, And I always joke, and students will get tired of me saying stuff like this, but I always joke that, it took me almost 5 years to go from associate to manager. And, that really used to bother me. But, as I think about things, my gravestone, my epitaph will not be, here lies Jeff Tang. It took him a little bit longer than some other people to go from associate marketing manager to brand manager. That's just not how things go. And when you think about it that way, you laugh, but you also realize that it's just not that important. And I think those seeds of self-reflection certainly were sown when I was comparing myself to all these other students, right? And they're all incredible. And I think the great thing is you don't have to compare yourself to them. You are yourself, and that's something my parents taught me at a very early age. And you can only do the best for yourself. And you can also, I would add as a corollary, do your best to help your other friends and colleagues and fellow students make the most of their personal journeys as well.
That sort of neatly segues to my next question. We have some listeners who are maybe just beginning their MBA journey, thinking about their careers and what's ahead. We also have some listeners who are likely planning to start Darden this August in our incoming class of 2022. What advice would you share with students as they think about pursuing an MBA and advancing their careers?
First of all, and there will always be a part of me that is so jealous of you guys. It is truly, I mean, I've waxed poetic about it for the last, 20 minutes or whatever, but it truly is this transformational experience. So buckle up. It's going to be this incredible, awesome experience. In terms of how you would prepare, in terms of like what to expect, and this is me putting my career coach hat on, so apologies if it's a little bit niche, but it's a great time to reflect back on your career and kind of those tentpole moments of your career, because what every just to varying degrees, of course, but what every student is going to have to do at some point is to give their 2-minute pitch. They're going to have to talk about being a team leader. They're going to have to talk about overcoming adversity, right? All these behavioral questions are going to be something that students will have to think about. And what better time than right now, when it is fresh in your mind, to think about your career and those tentpole moments in your career and start writing them down, because the vividness that you have today about those stories, you'll wish you had back in 5 months or 6 months from now, September, October, November, when you're like, oh, what happened there? What was that guy's name again? And if you have that vividness there, you'll be able to craft these rich, beautiful stories to share with your employers that really brings to life your experience and your expertise and your transferable skills. And so to me, that's the one thing that I kept remembering to myself. For me, like, you may not be surprised, but the analytical data question was a really hard one for me to answer as a former journalist. And I spent hours and hours, going to and from classes, eating dinner at night. Like, I'm just like racking my brain for the right story. And so if I had maybe written down a bunch of stories, prior to coming to Darden, that might have saved me hours of struggle on the other end.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much for. We covered a lot of ground here on the podcast. It's been great spending this time with you. We always end our conversations just with asking our guests just the why Darden question. We've talked about this a lot here, but do want to give you an opportunity to maybe speak directly to it as we sign off. For you, a prospective student listening to this podcast, why should that student consider Darden?
Darden is, of course, physically this truly special place. When you step on grounds, I know this is going to sound weird, but you feel the magic and the tradition of, all the academic ideals of Thomas Jefferson. And I know that is so cliche, but it is weird. There is this aura about the place that you just know. But at the same time, it's really truly the human aspect of Darden that I cannot express to you enough. Will change you in the greatest of ways. And I've talked about those right people that were there for you in that season in your life. And I can look back so fondly to Greg Fairchild or Elliot Weiss, and Casey and so many other professors by name, right? Like 7, 8 years later. And I can tell you, I remember, Elliot having really great conversations with me. And I remember the gadget game that he kind of played with us and our students. And I remember Professor Fairchild having me over with some other students to his house for at business ethics and literature class, and showing us his Muhammad Ali book that you had to wear gloves to leaf through because it was so rare and so special. And having his beautiful family and his kids kind of excitedly tell you about this incredible book about Muhammad Ali. And so it's those type of experiences that you will have, or this will date me, of course, but like I have these amazing memories of these halls of learning team rooms, right? Like they're just all kind of stacked next to each other. And but Call Me Maybe by Carly Rae Jepsen was like that was I think 2011 was the year that song blew up. And I just remember one of the learning team rooms just blasting that song. And the next thing you know, like a bunch of us are all like kind of like dancing in the hallways and dancing in our learning team rooms in this really silly way at like 9:30 at night after, you know, banging out decision analysis cases. And for me, those are the reasons you go to Darden, right? Is that you get to build those friendships and relationships with students and with professors certainly, and with staff hopefully, like the incredible career development center folks and the team that we've built up. And so we're so excited to be hopefully some of the people who are there for you in this season of your life. And that's, I think, the best way I can put it.
Jeff, I hope you and your family stay safe and healthy during this time. I know how busy the first few weeks in any new job are. We're so appreciative of you're taking the time to share your story with our listeners, and look forward to seeing you on grounds as soon as we can.
Sounds great, Brett. Thanks so much for having me.
And that was my interview with Jeff Tang, Senior Director for General Management and Marketing Careers here at the Darden School of Business. As always, if you have any comments, suggestions, requests, anything you'd like for us to cover here on the podcast, we're all ears. We can be reached at Darden, that's DARDEN, @virginia.edu. And until next time, stay safe, be well, and thanks for listening.